impenetrable depths of Hanol County's old-growth forest. Jake's trail camera captures the impossible, a 7-foot-tall behemoth stepping into the clearing, its dark eyes gleaming with uncanny intelligence as it stares straight at the lens. The timestamp reads 4:23 a.m., a moment that shatters Jake's world and ignites a perilous obsession. But as he replays the chilling images, strange signs emerge around his isolated cabin. Massive footprints circling the perimeter, cryptic glyphs carved into ancient bark, and an unnatural silence that swallows the night, drawn back into the woods for irrefutable proof. Jake realizes too late that the hunter has become the hunted, with every shadow hiding a watchful presence that knows his every move. I'm still trembling as I type these words. What began as a routine inspection of my trail cameras escalated into the most horrifying experience I've ever endured, and I captured every moment on film. It all started last month when I reviewed footage from one of my devices, uncovering something that shattered my perception of the wilderness surrounding my home in Hanol County. The recording was from my Recon-X camera early last Sunday morning, and it appended everything I believed about these woods. My name is Jake, and for the last 8 years, I have called 40 acres of isolated woodland my home, located roughly 15 miles northeast of Eureka. I operate a modest logging business and navigate these forests with the familiarity most people reserve for their own homes. I've encountered bears, cougars, and majestic elk herds that leave you speechless, but nothing prepared me for what appeared on that camera feed that day. The morning unfolded ordinarily. I brewed my coffee, glanced at the forecast, the usual misty May rain, and packed my ATV with new SD cards for the trail cameras. I maintained 6 Recon-X models dispersed throughout my land. They're pricey, but invaluable for tracking animals and surveilling the area in my absence. The particular camera in question is placed about 2 miles into the property, along an ancient deer path that overlooks a natural meadow. I've spotted everything there from Roosevelt elk to wandering black bears. It's as secluded as it comes, no paths, no phone signal, just dense, ancient timber untouched by loggers for generations. That afternoon, when I inserted the SD card into my computer, I anticipated the standard assortment of deer ears and inquisitive raccoons. Instead, I froze, staring at an image that sent ice through my veins. In the dim light before dawn, a colossal upright form loomed. Not a bear standing tally recognized that silhouette all too well. This entity towered at least 7 feet, cloaked in thick dark hair, with a build that was eerily humanoid yet utterly inhuman. The timestamp showed for 23 a.m. It remained frozen for precisely 47 seconds over 3 sequential photos before vanishing into the shadows. In the sharpest frame, details emerged. A pronounced forehead, shadowy eyes piercing straight at the lens, and a look that struck me as aware, inquisitive. Almost knowing, I must have examined those pictures for hours, my mind racing for logical answers. A prankster in a suit, an optical illusion distorting a bear, some glitch in the tech. But after years with these cameras, I can spot authenticity. This was genuine. Sleep evaded me that night. Every groan of the settling cabin, every twig brushing the eaves, heightened my nerves. By midnight, I resolved to do something I now question as either courageous or reckless. I would return with my camcorder for superior proof. The following day was dedicated to preparation. I recharged every battery, stowed camping supplies in my truck, and informed my neighbor Pete about a nocturnal photography excursion in the backwoods. I omitted the camera. Discovery Pete already views my solitary lifestyle as eccentric, and mentioning Sasquatch would seal that opinion. As dusk fell on Monday, I maneuvered my Chevy as deep as the faded logging trail permitted, then trekked the final mile burdened with 60 pounds of equipment. I established camp roughly 100 yards from the sighting spot, concealed in foliage with an unobstructed view of the glade. The strategy was straightforward. Observe, remain vigilant, and ideally secure footage that dwarfed the still images in clarity. Reality, however, diverged wildly from my expectations. The initial hours passed serenely, almost tranquilly. Nighttime in the woods pulses with its own cadence, the far-off call of a barred owl, the scamper of rodents in the leaves, the soft sigh of breeze among the sequoias. My Sony camcorder stayed poised, its infrared beam active, sweeping the perimeter for any stir. Around 11 p.m., an unnatural hush descended. Not the typical woodland calm, but a profound silence. Even the crickets ceased. From countless nights here, I knew this signaled a major presence, something substantial enough to silence all else. Then came the initial snap of a branch, originating straight across the meadow, perhaps 50 yards distant. Another followed, then more, intentional, paced footfalls, bipedal, weighty. I lifted the camera, activating the infrared, but the screen revealed only impenetrable trunks. The steps halted. 10 minutes of nothing. Then a sound erupted that electrified my skin deep. Rumbling utterance, blending snarl and keen, alien to any familiar beast. It echoed from various angles, as if the source encircled me broadly. I'd been holding my breath unconsciously. As I released it, movement caught my eye, a silhouette peeling from the trees, gliding with an elegance defying its bulk. On the infrared screen, a towering two-legged shape entered the open space. It was the entity from the photos, but animated now striding, vividly real in a manner that rendered the snapshots trivial. The footage I obtained in those ensuing minutes solidified my faith in the extraordinary. The being I hesitate to label it Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Terms too frivolous for the gravity of the sight reached at least 7.5 feet. Its shoulders spanned broadly, narrowing to a waist in humanoid fashion. The pelt was deep brown, verging on black, dense against the cool air. Yet its locomotion sealed its authenticity, each stride calculated, rhythmic in a way no disguise could mimic. Its head pivots were seamless. Innate no fabrication could emulate such fluidity. For roughly 5 minutes, it lingered in the glade's heart, pivoting occasionally to survey the Once, it appeared to fixate on my concealment. Through the infrared, its eyes gleamed large, obscure, profoundly perceptive. We locked gazes across the expanse, appraising one another hunter and hunted. Though roles blurred, what transpired next haunts my dreams. The figure advanced straight toward me, not meandering, but marching with intent, aware of my presence. My grip trembled, struggling to stabilize the lens. Flight instincts surged, yet paralysis gripped me, captivated by the spectacle at 30 yards. Features sharpened, a visage merging simian and sapiens traits, a robust brow akin to a gorilla's, yet a defined nose and mouth nearing human. Arms extended longer than ours, but not fully ape. It dwelled in that eerie limbo between known and foreign at 20 yards. It paused, cocking its head in apparent intrigue. A realization struck like frost. This entity feared nothing from me. It probed me as a researcher might a novel find. I strove for immobility, but my breaths roared in the stillness, betraying me. It stepped nearer, then again. At 15 yards, its odor assailed me, musky, feral, like sodden canine laced with ancient instinct, igniting primal alarms. Then my camera's power failed. The infrared extinguished, plunging me into void. I groped for the spare battery, fumbling in panic, dropping it repeatedly before insertion, when the device revived. The being had evaporated, not retreated, but erased. As if phantom, I remained rooted for an hour, pulse thundering, probing the edges for traces. Zilch. The woods resumed their nocturnal chorus, as though the incident dissolved. Yet I possessed video, Nearly 6 minutes of unparalleled Sasquatch documentation. Gathering nerve to dismantle camp and retreat to my vehicle, I unearthed something chilling. Fresh imprints encircled my truck, enormous anthropoid tracks with a gait spanning 4 feet at minimum. The entity from the meadow had tailed me to the road. I drove home sluggishly, 20 miles per hour, eyes darting to mirrors, flinching at phantoms. Upon reaching the cabin, I hastily uploaded the files to my PC and duplicated them across 3 drives. Viewing on the larger display amplified the wonder. Pristine HD, intricate details, sans tampering. Musculature rippled beneath the coat, thorax expanded with inhalations, gait adjusted to terrain variances. Its responses to ambient noises, head snaps at owl hoots, halts at distant cracks were convincing. I've consulted 3 video analysts. None detect forgery or attire. Proportions hold steady, illumination and shades align flawlessly. Motions exhibit authentic kinetics beyond replication, but the clincher. A frame capturing its profile as it glances aside. The cranial form defies known fauna more, humanoid than primate, yet distinct. Its countenance conveys acuity and wonder, not the vacant gaze of an actor. 3 days on, I revisited the cameras. All 6 lay demolished, not ravaged by wildlife or elements, but methodically disassembled, components strewn. SD cards vanished, erasing months of data equating to endless hours invested. Ada still etched into a towering redwood near the primary site. A glyph, 3 vertical strokes, bisected by 2 horizontals. Intentional, meaningful, perhaps advisory. I'd never beheld such in my lifelong woodland tenure. Tracks nearby narrated identical colossal prints from my truck, but multiplied. The being operated in Campania clan, inhabiting these groves. My devices unwittingly invading their domain. Defying prudence, I dispatched an edited clip to select authorities. Responses ranged from blatant fraud to costumed farce. Curiously, as the footage circulated wider than intended, correspondence emerged. Woodsmen, trackers, trekkers from the northwest, confiding suppressed tales. Accounts aligned, immense bipeds of sapient bent, familial, evading humans, yet monitoring incursions. The Olympic project reached out recently, seeking site access. I've consented to limited instrumentation placement, post-camera sabotage. Caution prevails. The recording stands testament, yet I craved substantiation. Last weekend, armed with molding compound, I cast several prints. Outcomes astound. 17-inch soles with distinct digits and skin textures. Uniformed across samples. I've gathered strands from snapped limbs at the locale. Lab results penned, but initial scopes reveal fibers neither wholly human nor matching regional beasts. Core and hue patterns elude databases. Fascinatingly, behavioral logs accumulate via distant sensors. Constructed arboreal forms, forged trails through brambles, stashed provisions in trunks. These imply foresight, implement employment, communal structure exceeding primate norms. 6 weeks post-event, transformation pervades my existence. Insomniac nights replay that gaze through the viewfinder, eyes brimming with cognition, not menace, but akin to ours. These entities transcend cinematic beasts. They redefine humanity's singularity. I venture deep, solo no more not from dread, but acknowledgement of trespass. The wrecked gear signaled demarcation. I honor it, albeit incompletely. The land shifts, aware of cohabitants. Dawn coffees on the porch involve scrutinizing horizons, pondering reciprocal observation, coexisting with myth incarnate oonts. My ordeal mirrors regional chronicles. Olympic Peninsula, Cascades, NorCal coasts yield myriad Sasquatch logs over decades. Dismissed often as errors or tricks, data scrutiny unveils trends. Incidents concentrate in pristine, inaccessible groves. Descriptors converge on physique and conduct. Kin-based, contact-averse, intellectually adept. My narrative aligns precisely. Might remnants from Bering migrations persist in America's wilds? Increasingly viable, given Northwest's vast untrodden expanses ample for elusive primates. Evaluate the proof independently. Yet recall, reality outstrips imagination. Impossibility oft masks the undiscovered dot, as the weeks stretched into months following that fateful night. The shadow of my encounter loomed larger in my daily life, infiltrating even the most mundane moments. I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder during routine chores around the property, my ears attuned to every subtle shift in the wind or distant rustle in the undergrowth. The forest, once a source of solace and livelihood in my logging work, now felt like a living entity, watchful and unpredictable. I'd catch myself pausing mid-task, axe in hand, while splitting wood, convinced their eyes were upon me from the thicket. The air seemed thicker, charged with an unspoken presence that made my skin prickle. Sleep came in fits, haunted by vivid replays of that massive form advancing through the clearing, its gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that suggested recognition, perhaps even judgment. I had agreed to let the team from the Olympic project onto my land, but with strict conditions. They arrived on a foggy Tuesday morning in mid-June, their SUV crunching over the gravel driveway as the mist clung to the treetops like a shroud. There were 4 of them: Dr. Elena Bascas, a primatologist with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor; Tom Riley, a burly tracker who'd spent decades in the back; Sarah Lynn, their tech specialist, carrying cases of sophisticated gear; and Marcus Hale, a documentary filmmaker tasked with recording their findings. I greeted them on the porch, my coffee mug steaming in the chill air, trying to mask the unease churning in my gut. Pete, my neighbor, had eyed their vehicle suspiciously from his fence line earlier, but I'd waved him off with a casual explanation about wildlife surveys. No need to stir up local gossip yet. We spent the first hour in my living room, huddled around my laptop as I played the footage for them frame by frame. The room fell silent except for the soft whir of the computer fan. Alina leaned forward, her brow furrowed, pausing the video at key moments to zoom in on the creature's features, the subtle flecks of muscles under fur, the deliberate blink of those deep-set eyes. "This isn't like anything I've seen in the archives," she murmured, her voice laced with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Tom nodded slowly, his weathered face impassive, but I caught the flicker of recognition in his eyes, as if he'd crossed paths with something similar in his own solitary hunts. Sarah jotted notes furiously, muttering about metadata and potential enhancements, while Marcus adjusted his camera, capturing our reactions for posterity. I felt exposed, vulnerable, sharing this piece of my nightmare with strangers, but their professional detachment was oddly reassuring. After the viewing, we geared up for the trek into the woods. I led the way on my ATV, the team following in a single file with backpacks laden with motion sensors, audio recorders, and thermal imaging devices. The path wound through towering firs and cedars, their branches interlacing overhead to form a dim canopy that filtered the sunlight into patchy beams. The air grew cooler, damper, carrying the earthy scent of moss and decaying leaves. Every so often, I'd point out landmarks of fallen log I'd cleared last season, a stream crossing where elk often drank, but my voice sounded hollow, strained. As we approached the clearing, a knot tightened in my stomach. The sight looked deceptively ordinary in daylight: wildflowers dotting the grass, birds flitting between branches, the redwood with its enigmatic carving standing sentinel. But I knew better. This place held secrets that daylight couldn't erase. We set up camp methodically, about 150 yards from the original encounter spot to avoid disturbing any potential activity. Sarah deployed a network of wireless cameras, their lenses glinting like watchful eyes as she synced them to a central tablet. Tom scattered bait stations, non-lethal lures like apples and nuts, while Alina collected soil samples and scanned for tracks with a handheld GPS. Marcus filmed it all, his quiet narration providing a backdrop to our work. I assisted where I could, but mostly observed, my mind racing with what-ifs. What if the creatures returned? What if they perceived this intrusion as a threat? The symbol on the tree bark seemed to stare back at me, its lines etched deeper in my memory than in the wood itself. 3 parallel strokes, intersected by 2 shorter ones, like a crude map or a territorial marker. I dephotographed it from every angle, but no online search or book consultation yielded matches. It felt personal, a silent communication across species lines. As evening descended, the forest transformed. The light faded gradually, painting the trees in hues of amber and shadow. We gathered around a small fire pit I'd dug, flames kept low to minimize disturbance, sharing stories over instant coffee. Alina spoke of similar sightings in the Klamath Mountains, patterns of vocalizations that echoed indigenous legends. Tom recounted a night in the Cascades where he'd heard wood knocks, rhythmic thuds that responded to his own attempts at imitation. Their tales built a tapestry of possibility, making my experience feel less isolated, yet more ominous. Sarah monitored the feeds on her screen, the infrared views showing nothing but swaying branches and the occasional deer. Marcus captured the ambience, his lens panning slowly across the darkening woods. I sat with my back against a log, my own camera at the ready, the weight of anticipation pressing on my chest like a physical force. The first sign came around 9 p.m. Subtle at first, distant crackle, like dry leaves underfoot, but too measured for wind. We froze, exchanging glances. Tom cocked his head, listening intently. "Could be a bear," he whispered, but his tone lacked conviction. The sound repeated, closer now, from the northeast edge of the clearing. Sarah's tablet beeped softly. One of the perimeter cameras had triggered. We crowded around the screen, hearts pounding in unison. The feed showed a thermal silhouette, large, upright, lingering at the tree line before retreating. Not definitive, but enough to spike adrenaline. Alina grabbed a recorder, playing a sequence of whoops and knocks she'd compiled from previous expeditions. The response was immediate, an echoing call from the depths, low and resonant, vibrating through the ground. It wasn't aggressive, but exploratory, as if answering a question we hadn't fully asked. Tension mounted as the night deepened. The fire crackled sparingly, casting flickering shadows that danced like phantoms. Every rustle amplified in the quiet, my senses heightened to the point of discomfort. I could smell the pine sap, taste the metallic temps of fear on my tongue. Around midnight, the silence returned, that oppressive hush I'd experienced before. Insects fell mute, birds ceased their nocturnal chatter. Tom signaled for quiet, his hand raised. Footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate, circling our camp at a distance. Not one set, but 2 or 3, synchronized in a way that suggested coordination. Marcus whispered into his mic, documenting the moment, while Sarah switched to multiview, her fingers trembling slightly on the controls. Then, a shape materialized on the thermal scan than the first, moving with that same fluid grace. It paused at the clearing's edge, perhaps 60 yards out, its heat signature pulsing steadily. Alina breathed out slowly, it's observing us. We held our positions, scarcely daring to move. The air grew heavier, laden with that familiar musky odor wafting on the breeze. My mind raced. Were they curious, or warning us away? The symbol on the tree flashed in my thoughts. Boundary we'd perhaps crossed again. Minutes stretched like hours, the figure holding its ground before emitting a soft grunt, almost contemplative. Then, as abruptly as it appeared, it melted back into the forest, the footsteps receding into nothingness. We didn't speak for a long while after, the team processing in silence. Sarah reviewed the captures, blurry but compelling thermal outlines, audio spikes of the vocalizations. Tom traced partial prints in the soft earth the next morning, measuring them at 18 inches larger than my previous casts, with deeper impressions suggesting greater weight. Elena hypothesized a male, perhaps a sentinel for the group. Marcus's footage added layers, the ambient sounds building a narrative of interaction rather than confrontation. As we packed up that afternoon, the forest felt alive with unseen eyes, the encounter leaving us with more questions than answers. I drove them back to the house, the ATV rumbling over roots and ruts, my thoughts swirling. This wasn't just evidence. It was a dialogue, a tentative bridge to something ancient and elusive. Back at the cabin, we debriefed over sandwiches and maps spread across the table. Alina outlined next steps, DNA sequencing on any new hair samples we'd snagged from low branches, acoustic analysis of the calls. Sarah uploaded data to their secure server, her excitement palpable despite the fatigue etching her face. Tom shared tips on non-invasive monitoring, emphasizing respect for the habitat. Marcus edited clips on his laptop, the screen glowing with infrared ghosts. I felt a strange mix of validation and dread. Their presence confirmed I wasn't mad, but amplified the reality of sharing my woods with these beings. As they departed at dusk, promising updates, I stood on the porch watching their taillights fade, the isolation settling back like a familiar cloak. That night, alone again, the house creaked with memories. I pored over the new footage, enhancing frames to reveal subtle details. A hand-like appendage brushing foliage, eyes reflecting faintly in the thermal glow. Sleep eluded me, replaced by visions of the creature's world family units foraging under moonlight, communicating in ways beyond our comprehension. A week later, Alina emailed preliminary results. The vocalizations matched patterns from other Northwest sites, with frequencies indicating complex structure. The prints showed dermal ridges akin to human fingerprints, but scaled up, defying known primates. Hair analysis hinted at an unknown species, the cortex layered differently from bears or apes, but suspense clung like fog. 2 nights after the team left, I heard knocks outside, 3 sharp raps on wood, answered by distant echoes. I grabbed my flashlight, stepping onto the deck, beams slicing the darkness. Nothing visible, but the air hummed with presence. Footprints appeared the next day, encircling the house perimeter, not threatening but assertive. The symbol reappeared, carved fresh on a fence post, identical lines, a reminder. I began documenting obsessively, journal entries detailing every anomaly, sketches of tracks, audio logs of nocturnal sounds. The property transformed into a labyrinth of clues, each discovery heightening the mystery. One evening, venturing to a remote creek for water samples, I stumbled upon a structure, branches woven into a dome-like shelter, concealed by ferns. Inside, scattered bones from small game, arranged neatly, evidence of habitation. My heart raced as I photographed it, senses alert for approach. A twig snapped nearby. I whirled, catching a glimpse of movement, all shadowy, vanishing swiftly. I retreated carefully, pulse echoing in my ears. The encounter brief but electric. Back home, reviewing the pics, the implications sank in. They weren't just passing through. This was home turf. Months blurred, each day laced with anticipation. I'd scan horizons at dawn, coffee in hand, wondering about their routines, hunting at twilight, resting in hidden glens. The intelligence I'd glimpsed evolved in my mind from curiosity to strategy, their avoidance a calculated choice. Sharing snippets online drew more stories. A hiker in Oregon describing similar glyphs. A logger in Washington recounting followed footsteps. Patterns emerged, weaving my tale into a broader enigma. Yet, doubt crept in during quiet moments. Was I inviting danger by probing deeper? The destroyed cameras lingered as a cautionary tale, their remnants stored in my shed like artifacts. I installed subtle perimeter alerts, beeps signaling motion, each trigger sending shivers. One stormy night, alarms blared. I rushed to the window, rain lashing panes, spotting hulking forms in lightning flashes, multiple retreating as thunder rolled. No damage, but a message clear. We're here. Watching as the seasons shifted toward autumn. The chill in the air mirrored the growing unease that had taken root in my soul, turning every shadow into a potential harbinger of the unknown. The leaves began to turn, carpeting the forest floor in rustling layers that masked footsteps and amplified every unexplained noise. I'd fortified the cabin with motion lights and reinforced locks, but security felt illusory against beings that moved like ghosts through the mist. The Olympic project team had promised regular check-ins, but their visits grew sporadic as funding dwindled and other leads pulled them away. Elena's last email mentioned anomalous DNA, marker sequences that bridged human and archaic hominid lines, but cautioned against jumping to conclusions. Still, her words lingered, fueling nights where I'd pore over maps, tracing potential migration routes from ancient Beringia to these very woods, wondering if I was mapping my own fate. One crisp October evening, as the sun dipped below the ridgeline, casting long, jagged shadows, I decided to push deeper into the territory than ever before. Armed with a backpack containing fresh batteries, a high-powered flashlight, and a small audio recorder, I set out along a faint game trail that veered northwest from the clearing. The path was overgrown, thorns snagging at my jeans. But I'd noticed subtle signs in recent weeks-spent saplings forming arches, stones arranged in patterns that defied natural erosion. Suspicion gnawed at me. Were these markers guiding or warning? The air thickened with the scent of damp earth and pine, and as daylight faded, the forest's symphony shifted to isolated calls. A lone wolf's howl answered by something deeper, more guttural, echoing from the valleys below. Hours into the hike, fatigue set in, my boots sinking into muddied soil, but a peculiar formation drew me onward. A cluster of felled logs arranged in a circular barrier, enclosing a shallow depression lined with ferns. It resembled a nest, large enough for several forms to huddle. My recorder captured the ambient hush as I circled it, noting the absence of animal scat or claw marks too orderly for wildlife. Kneeling to examine a strand of dark hair caught on a branch, a sudden chill swept through, raising gooseflesh on my arms. The wind, no, it was still. Then, a soft thump resonated from behind the barrier, like a weight shifting on leaves. I froze, heart slamming against my ribs, straining to peer into the gloom. Nothing visible, but the sensation of being observed intensified, as if the very trees held their breath. Retreating slowly, flashlight beam jittering in my grip, I heard it, a whisper of movement paralleling my path, branches parting just out of sight. Not aggressive, but persistent, like a shadow mirroring my steps. My mind raced. Was this an escort out of their domain, or a lure deeper in? The trails seemed to twist unfamiliarly in the dark, landmarks blurring, forcing me to rely on instinct. A low vocalization pierced the night, closer than before. A modulated rumble that vibrated in my chest, conveying not threat but urgency. I quickened my pace, breath ragged, the recorder picking up my own panicked footfalls, interspersed with those unseen pursuers. Finally bursting back onto familiar ground near the clearing, I collapsed against a trunk, scanning the perimeter. Silence reclaimed the woods, but my skin crawled with the certainty that I'd been allowed to escape for now. The next morning, examining the audio files over black coffee, anomalies emerged. Layered sounds beneath the rumble, almost like syllables. Rhythmic patterns that Elena later analyzed as potential. But before her response arrived, Another incident escalated the dread. Waking to a pre-dawn scratching at the cabin door, I bolted upright, grabbing the shotgun I now kept loaded by the bed. The sound was deliberate, nails dragging across wood, pausing as if listening for reaction. Peering through the curtain, moonlight revealed nothing, but the porch creaked under unseen weight. I flung the door open, light flooding out, illuminating fresh gouges in the frame, 3 parallel lines, mirrored by 2 crossing them, identical to the tree carving. Footprints led away, vanishing into the underbrush, but a single hair clung to the splintered wood, coarse and black. That mark became a fixation, appearing sporadically on a shed wall after a supply run, etched into the mud near my well. Each instance built a creeping paranoia, as if the beings were imprinting their presence into my reality, blurring the line between observer and observed. I'd lie awake, ears tuned to the night, distinguishing between wind-swayed branches and calculated approaches. One sleepless vigil, around 3 a.m., a silhouette framed in the window toll, broad-shouldered, motionless. It lingered for what felt like eternity, then tilted its head before dissolving into shadow. No aggression, but the implication chilled. They could enter if they chose. Seeking answers, I delved into local law, poring over faded journals from early settlers in Eureka's library. Tales of forest guardians whispered by indigenous tribes beings that protected sacred groves, communicating through signs and sounds. Patterns aligned with my experiences, avoided conflict, but enforced boundaries with subtle intent. Returning home that afternoon, I found the cabin untouched, but a new structure awaited in the yarder, stack of branches forming the glyph in 3 dimensions, positioned where I'd spotted from the deck. Dismantling it felt like defiance. Yet as I scattered the pieces, a distant whoop echoed, almost mocking. Winter's approach intensified the isolation. Snow blanketing the property in a muffled white tracks, preserving like fossils. I'd follow them during daylight excursions, chainsaw idle in my logging work, discovering caches, berries preserved in ice, fish bones arranged neatly. Evidence of sustenance, but also ingenuity tools fashioned from stone, sharpening marks on rocks. One discovery unnerved me profoundly. A crude effigy near the original clearing, woven from vines and fur, resembling a human form my height, perhaps a warning or mimicry. Photographing it, a crunch of snow behind me spun me around. Empty space, but warmth lingered in the air, as if something had just departed. The suspense peaked during a blizzard in late December. Winds howling like banshees, power flickering out. Huddled by the wood stove generator humming faintly, I heard pounding on the roof, rhythmic, insistent. Not hail, too patterned. Venturing outside with a lantern, snow stinging my face, I glimpsed shapes on the ridgeline, multiple figures, silhouetted against the storm, watching. They didn't advance, but their presence endured through the night, knocks responding to my shouts, a dialogue in percussion. Dawn revealed encircled tracks around the cabin, the glyph pressed into snow at intervals, a perimeter unbroken. Spring thawed the tension somewhat, but revelations continued. Elena's team returned briefly, confirming DNA as a novel hominid branch, publishing anonymized findings that sparked debates in cryptozoology circles. I declined interviews, preferring solitude, but shared encounters multiplied online, validating my story without exposing me. Yet, personal brushes persisted. A handprint on my truck window after a town trip, larger than human, fingers splayed in curiosity. Or the night I awoke to breathing outside my bedroom walls, deliberate, syncing with my own until I held mine. Breaking the rhythm, reflecting on it all, as summer cycled back. The forest's enigma deepened my respect for its hidden inhabitants. No longer just creatures, but kin to forgotten lineages, coexisting in fragile balance. I'd spot glimpses during hikes, a flash of fur, a retreating form always at a distance, maintaining the veil. The intelligence in those eyes, first captured on camera, now etched in memory, challenged my solitude, forging an unspoken pact. I tread lighter now, logging selectively, honoring the boundaries marked in bark and snow. The world feels vaster, laced with wonders veiled in shadow, where the line between myth and reality blurs under watchful gazers in quiet moments on the deck. Scanning the tree line with coffee in hand, I sense their reciprocity observing the observer. Encounters ebb, but suspense simmers, a constant undercurrent. What if they approach closer? What messages lie in the next glyph? The property, once mine alone, now shared in silent accord, a testament to the unknown thriving beyond our maps. Judging the evidence, from footage to footprints, invites wonder. The impossible, merely awaiting acknowledgement in the depths of these ancient woods.